Greetings to everyone. This is part of an effort collaboration between NITI Aayog and United Nations Economic and Social Council for Asia Pacific in Bangkok on enhancing and developing capacity for trade policy research and analytics, international trade policy research and analytics. So broadly at NITI Aayog in the trade and commerce vertical, we have been conducting a series of webinars and training programs to develop capacity for doing different types of analytical studies and research studies to inform trade policy for the wide range of trade agreements that are being negotiated, or analyzing the potential for increasing exports, promoting exports, and so on. So in this regard, we are really delighted to have Dr. Rupa Chanda to agree to have a collaboration between the United Nations UNESCAP and NITI Aayog Trade and Commerce on a series of programs that we are planning to do. In that series, this is the very first program. This is a workshop in which Dr. Alexei Kravchenko will be talking about the tool that the UNESCAP has developed, which can facilitate trade negotiations. So I'll leave the floor to you, Dr. Alexei. Please go ahead and you can start going through the presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Badri. I don't know, Rupa, if you want to say a few words to the participants.
Nothing in particular. I think, this is the start of a series of workshops and other collaborative activities. So we're really looking forward to this collaboration. And as mentioned by Dr. Badri Narayan, the idea is to enhance analytical capacity, because the sort of analysis that's required and the quantitative modeling and other tools that are required when we're negotiating FTAs, I think there is a need in most countries to develop those skill sets. And so that with that idea, we are launching this collaboration. And Alexei is providing the briefing, sort of the overview session this time. And then what we have decided is to go forward and get into further details on specific kinds of modules or aspects of this analytical sort of capacity, like it could be on particular provisions or sectors and so on. So we'll develop that as it comes along. So today's is really the background to what's coming forward in the collaboration. So thank you very much, everyone, for being here, and I look forward.
Okay, I should now be sharing my screen. I hope you all can see it. Can you please confirm you see the screen?
Yeah, we can see it.
Excellent. Okay. So greetings, everybody. And so in this presentation, I will be briefly introducing you to TINA, its main features, origins, and data sources. So TINA is online. If you go tina.trade, that's how you access it. So first of all, what exactly is TINA? So it stands for Trade Intelligence and Negotiation Advisor. It's an online tool we designed to assist trade policymakers and researchers in carrying out analytical tasks that are commonly conducted as parts of trade negotiations. So how do we start developing it? Well, economies in the Asia-Pacific regions currently involved in about 200 trade agreements, and many more are being negotiated. However, developing countries often lack the necessary analytical skills and resources to prepare well for such trade negotiations, and sometimes need help. And in the past at UNESCAP here, we've been asked many times to assist with impact assessment studies or negotiation techniques. And such analytical studies really typically take months to carry out and require specialist knowledge, and really pretty expensive. So it meant that at our best, we could maybe help one or two countries at a time, and countries with limited resources faced obviously a clear disadvantage in preparing for such negotiations. So as such, an idea was born. The underlying idea was to automate some of the tasks involved in preparing for negotiations, so the time and financial savings could be spent more productively elsewhere. And all member states, particularly countries with special needs, could benefit from it. Well, ever since we've showcased the first version of TINA, by the way, we're about 3.1 version now, but ever first we showed the first version of TINA back in 2018, and we showed this to policymakers actually being involved in negotiations before. The response has always been the same. I wish the TINA was there when I was working on such and such trade agreement. So this tool, TINA, was developed in close consultation with current and former members of trade negotiation teams, including from India and other countries in Asia Pacific region, and also with feedback and input from trade specialists and academics. And since 2018, when we launched it, it helped already several countries in the region. For example, at the request of the government of Bangladesh, TINA was used to help them with the ongoing Bangladesh-India trade negotiations feasibility study. Bangladesh, Cambodia, and Vanuatu also benefited from a new key feature of TINA, which evaluates trade impacts of LDC status graduation and resulting partial withdrawals of preferences by major trading partners, such as the European Union, United States, China, and India. This feature is also significant as it identifies sectors and markets most likely to be impacted, and so the policymakers can really pay attention to it. All right, so this is TINA again. Before I start showing to you, just wanted to highlight because it's not very obvious. If you go to menu, there's resources here, and it does include the explanatory note as well as some of the underlying methodological papers. So if you get stuck, you can refer to those, which is available at the landing page. Okay. So just the very first feature that we get started, let's go ahead and get started and select India. Type in India as an economy that we're interested in and having trade negotiations with something else. So for the very starters, it provides trade statistics. Okay, so if you this is usually the very first step. May not sound like much, but keep in mind for many economies in the region, these statistics are not really readily available. If one was interested, for example, in Bangladesh's biggest export destinations, you really couldn't do that directly from Comtrade because the latest data is only available from 2015. So we use mirror data available from all the other trade partners. The other thing that TINA does, it does an offensive list, which I'll show you, and it gives you a list of export products and categories that trade negotiators should focus on to get concessions from the trade partners. The list provides detailed product level information, including time trends, relative unit prices, and other exporting countries. It has an inbuilt partial equilibrium model. This means it can provide estimates of the tariff reductions in the offensive list, and it has the text analysis, which is the most recent features. Right. So let me go ahead and get into the trade statistics feature. So we selected India. So the first thing we want to show is to maybe display the current trade. Now this section includes the biggest export destinations, and you can see here the United States is the biggest export market. We can change it to look at the biggest import sources, and we can see China is the biggest import source as a country in 2019. Now, you can also examine these features in different years. So you can select, for example, in 2018. And it's important to ensure that this analysis is not really driven by some animality in one particular year. Again, this may seem like a standard feature, but again, for 171 reporters, that's only for 171 countries we have directly data reported from Comtrade. whereas there's about 230 plus trade partners. So why is there discrepancies? Why some countries don't report? Well, the reasons are diverse. Some lack the capacity to collect and submit data to the UNESCAP, and some, like for example, Bangladesh, have different reporting periods. So they don't do it by calendar year; they do it by a financial year. Excuse me, and for that reason, they don't actually submit it to Comtrade. So you wouldn't be able to see exactly what happens directly from trade. So again, going back to the case of the Bangladesh, the way we do it is we use the data from the 170 countries that we do have that report the statistics, and then if they report that they export something to Bangladesh, we record it as Bangladeshi import and vice versa. Now, it's important to know that there's limitations. First of all, the dollar values are in different units, CIF for imports versus FOB for exports. But second, this method misses out on bilateral trade between countries that have both data missing. So, for example, there'll be no trade evident between countries such as Tonga, Timor-Leste, Turkmenistan, Venezuela, and Bangladesh. This total trade, most traded commodities here, you have petroleum, diamonds, petroleum oils. So if we go back, you'll see this table that includes all trade partners, the total exports, imports, trade balance, as well as information on the current as well as future trade agreements. So, for example, if you click here in Afghanistan and show you that there's a partial scope agreement with India already, and also the India and Afghanistan are part of SAFTA since 2016 here. Okay, so you can order this table and by the export value or by surplus. Now, let's see which country we can negotiate a trade agreement. For example, let's maybe click on the United States and see what happens. We will select and negotiate here. Let's look at the first thing here. Again, we can look at the bilateral trade statistics. Let's go ahead and select that. And this is really the sort of exploratory 101 research that you do as part of the trade agreement. If you are indeed going to negotiate a trade agreement with the United States, of course you want to know how important they are as a trade partner. Of course you want to know what you are already sending to them, right? Again, if you look at any feasibility study, this is the sort of research that will be on the second page to give background. And now you don't really need to go and pull it out there. It's available. So we can see here that U.S. is the largest export destination of India, and it takes about 1/6 of all the exports from India. Whereas in terms of imports, it's only about 2.33% here. That's the import sources of the United States, right? So it's a less important trade partner for the United States. Scrolling lower, you can see the import sources of India, and China is, for many other countries, also the biggest source. United States also a big source, 7.3% here. And India is export destination for about 2% of the United States total exports, 2.09%, $34 billion, so not insignificant. So in terms of individual products here, we can see the top value imports in the United States from India are diamonds here, followed by medicines, some seafood, crustaceans, and some oils, jewelry, and some more oils, right? We can also see how this compares to the largest categories imported by the United States from the world. We can see that, again, United States imports a lot of oils, vehicles, as well as medicaments. And you can see here that, for example, medicaments and vehicles are present in both lists. So these are imports of the United States from the world. imports of the United States from India, and medicaments are here, vehicles are here. Medicaments are here, vehicles are both are here. So that means that it's some of those total categories match, and it's important for the analysis because it's then relatively large exporter of these goods to the United States. And the United States may be worried a little bit about the flooding of markets potentially if they do sign a free trade agreement. Conversely, if we look at the India's imports from the United States, we see that India's top imports are oils, also diamonds, jets, and India's total exports are a bit lower. It's a little bit different now. Let me just, sorry. Top imports from the world are oils, metals, and coal. All right. United States exported commodities. India, petroleum, oils, and diamonds. United States, something secret. But also oil, petroleum, electronics, and human blood. I'm not quite exactly sure what that is there. So as noted earlier, you can also check this besides individual year. You can see 2018, for example, here, just to see that the data is consistent. And yes, we do have diamonds and medicaments and seafoods. We check it for 2017. What do we have here? Diamonds, medicaments, and seafoods. So that's consistent. And so, but it's very important if you, for example, look at smaller trade partners. It's you'll very often find that the top traded products are not always consistent. It would be wrong to, for example, look at one particular sector in particular, without realizing that it's on decline. I might not be interested going further. Now let's go back to the 2019 here, and we can, to get more detailed information about any particular products, you can actually click on the any of the HS codes. So if you look at, for example, petroleum oils here, 271012, you click here, and the tool gives you more information. So if available, it'll give you the existing tariff rates applied by the United States. There's no preferential agreement because there's no FTA, there's no PTA, there's no RTA between India and the United States. But the United States does have a most favored nation of tariff of 7%. I'll get back to the indices a little bit later. We also see the time series of the nominal trade values as well as the unit prices. Now, this is quite important. You can see that the value of exports from India to the United States, that's the blue one, and unit price of exports from the from India to the United States. And the unit price basically means the value divided by quantity as reported by India. Now, the other we can see here on the graph in the time series. So this is the trends that we see here. We can also look at trends of exports and imports from the world, right? So if we select and update the visualizations, then we have the value of exports from India to the United States down here, but also the value of exports of India to the world and the value of imports of the United States to the world. So you see that, as we know, it's one of the top exports of India to the United States. But there is a significant gap, meaning that potentially, if opened up, United States can import more from India if that's possible. but also you want to see overall the health of the market that you're interested in. You can see I have a little U shape here of the total imports of the United States. So it's a rather stable market, right? One way you can do that. So the other thing that's rather important is how does that compare vis-a-vis other trade partners, right? So we can have here and select the visualization of the trade partners, and we can see how does that look vis-a-vis trade partners. And you see the top partner is actually Canada. Then the green one, which is the Netherlands, have been increasing. Russian Federation probably fall now. United Kingdom has been steadily declining across the years. And so this is available for the top 5 economies. If there's another economy that you're interested that's not in the top 5, you can select more economies and say, for example, I don't know, Egypt, Venezuela, and Congo, and select an updated visualization. And if interested for any particular reason, you can update that. Again, so this is the nominal value, the total values, and you can also compare with unit prices. And again, unit prices are something that's been specifically asked for us by trade negotiators because they've been asked, well, when we negotiate, we want to see how competitive our products vis-a-vis other countries. So in the case of this particular product, which is petroleum oils, you can see that the prices very much move in unison, and there's not much of a difference, but we can see that, for example, the Indian ones tend to be a little bit higher than the lower cost, which is from the Russian Federation. That's the cheapest one here. So for anyone involved in examining bilateral trade, this is very much the very first step to get a feel about what are the trade flows, what are the trends between the countries, right? Okay, so that's the bilateral trade statistics going back, and we can look at the trade facilitation measures, and that's important, particularly if your trade agreement is likely to have a trade facilitation chapter, but the United States doesn't submit it to us, so we can't really examine that. We can look at it later with the different country selections. We'll leave this for now. I'll come back that, but the most popular feature, which really was the feature that started off Tina, was the which commodities should you negotiate tariffs on, right? So if you recall a bit earlier, I told you that there's a specific tab of Tina. Let me just go back to the home page here, and there's resources. And one of them is these simple analytical method of using trade and tariff data for identifying an offensive list when negotiating a free trade agreement, an example of a Sri Lanka-China free trade agreement. Now, this paper presented a step-by-step discussion on methodology of developing and the offensive list, right? So the priority list for which to insist on obtaining concessions during trade negotiations, using free trade agreement negotiations between Sri Lanka and China as an example. And in developing the particular offensive list for Sri Lanka, it was proposed that the product must be China already imports, that Sri Lanka already exports and could potentially export more, and which already has tariffs imposed on it, and a product in which Sri Lanka demonstrated a comparative advantage. So the advantage of that methodology is that really it relied primarily on trade and tariff data, which was readily available. Noting that, so let me just go back to the offensive list here. So I hope you can. No, that's not it. No. Okay. Okay, this will have to do. Okay, so how is this, and the methodology again is developed in, discussed in great detail in the accompanying paper I just mentioned. So the 4 criteria are that this offensive list, that the product must be, this is not India. Product must be imported by the potential trade partner, in this case, the United States. It must be produced and exported by India. India must have a comparative advantage, and the trade partner must already have a tariff on the product. Right? So just realized I haven't showed you. So these are the 4 categories of the offensive list, right? So first, it must be imported by the trade partner, by the United States. It must be produced and exported by India. India must have a comparative advantage, and the trade partner must already have a tariff on the product, right? So that's the criteria for the product being on the list. So going back, start building a negotiating list, right? So here we are. We come across to this filter, and the idea behind the filter is that, well, if you're gonna go for a trade agreement, there's about 5,000, 500 something products on the harmonized schedule of the commodity list, right? Do you really want to fight to the death for 0 tariffs on each one of them as soon as possible? And you know, it's not just even the 0 tariff per se, it's the liberalization schedule. You'll see if you go through annexes of many of the trade agreements is that different products are treated very differently, right? Some products have the tariff schedules where basically as soon as the agreement is signed, the tariff goes down, the applied tariffs goes down to 0% immediately. Some have it over a period of 5 years, some have over 15, some years of the, some go over 20 years, right? So which is important? Which product should be really on the priority to get the energy of fighting, and this is our list to get the best concessions from. So that's the idea here, is try to find this particular list here. So we see this filter, and this filter goes back to the 4 criteria that I just mentioned, right? So first of all, the filter must be the one that the product must be the one that the United States imports, right? So we can say, okay, United States must import at least $1,000 worth of products here, probably more. So over here, 1,000 is sort of the minimum criteria. Maybe if we have a wider list, and I'll show you we do have a wider list, we'll want to increase the threshold here. So by the way, if there's any questions, you can look at the explanations of each one of these filters here. And the second filter is that India must already be exporting this particular product, at least $1,000. But again, we can come back and adjust this filter later. Filter 3, it must have a non-zero tariff. And here we mean MFN tariff, bound tariff, and potentially a preferential tariff if India and the United States already had some sort of agreement between them. It's important to actually include the bound tariff. That's the maximum legally allowed tariff under the WTO that a country can apply at non-discriminatory basis, right? And the reason for it is because even though they might have a low MFN tariff, if they have enough what we call policy water, if they have enough policy space to increase this tariff to everybody, MFN tariff might not be that important. It's the bound tariff that's usually important. We want it to be more than 0. Maybe if it's too wide, maybe if the country has lots of tariffs in place, maybe we might want to increase this threshold to be a little bit higher. And also whether we want to make sure that India is actually good at making a particular product. So it must have a standard revealed comparative advantage value greater than 1. So the formulas are also on the on the here, right? So that's the formula. Here you can read it, but basically what it means is that the standard reveal, well, India, standard reveal comparative advantage is that product K of country X is the formula, and basically it shows if the exports from India to the whole world in a particular product vis-a-vis total exports in the world of that product are proportionate, right? So for example, if India takes is responsible for 5% of the world exports in that particular product, and 5% of the global trade in that particular product. So it's relatively balanced. But if, for example, India has a very large share of that product in the world, and it's disproportionate, then the standard reveal comparative advantage value of that index would be higher, and therefore it would probably be more successful in gaining traction in the US markets if it's further liberalized, right? So we can, again, 1 is sort of the industry standard. Below 1, that means it's not an advantage. It actually is less successful in other countries in exporting that product to the whole world. There's also a potential filter to have a bilateral reveal comparative advantage. So that means when you just look at a pairwise, in this case would be India and United States, whether India is proportionally selling that particular product better to the United States than is implied by its share in its market for total goods. And there's an option to skip both of these filters, but sometimes it's good to include this filter if, for example, 2 countries are big, but if they're small, it just may be that India hasn't entered that market yet, and for many smaller countries, you'll actually not find the value for BRCA, bilateral reveal comparative advantages, and that can potentially remove some of the important products. But so there's argument to include both of them. I'll leave it in for now. So we have these sort of preset filters, and if I generate the list right now, you will see that there's only 384 commodities, right? And part of the reason is if you modify filters, go down, you can see the first filter, United States imports at least $1,000. Most products, 5,000 out of 5,500 products already passed this filter, right? So this is a not very restrictive filter, and we may increase it by 10,000. The second filter, India exports at least $1,000 worth, and again, this is not a very restrictive filter. We might, for example, consider 10,000 instead. This filter narrows it down if the reveal comparative advantages should be more than 1. But this is the last filter that I mentioned, and you see for many of the products, even though India exports a lot of them, they're not very competitive in the United States. Not because they're not competitive per se, it's because they're not in the United States market from India, and this potentially leaves out quite a few of these products. So we would skip this filter and renegotiate the list. So here we have now, instead of 300, we have 1,000 products. And again, you can modify the filter for, say, okay, well, the United States may increase it up to 100,000 rather than 10,000. And then we'll see, well, even still more commodities. Impressive. We'll leave it at now at 1,000 products, and we can see here that the top imported commodity from India, as we saw before, but was oils, has that 7% MFN tariffs that we saw earlier. Significant simple as well as bilateral reveal comparative advantages. All right, we can see here on the other way, jewelry, India has a total positive reveal comparative advantage globally, but it's actually not that strong bilaterally. And it's actually possible that it's due to whatever tariff or non-tariff measures that the United States is imposing. So that's another possibility here. So going just like before in the descriptive statistics, we can see we can see more details of any of these products. For example, bed lining, which has a high revealed and bilateral comparative advantage, and we can see here that it has a relatively high MFN tariff as well as bound tariff of 20.9%. So we can see that what India imported 1.3, sorry, United States imported from India 1.34% of total imports. But India has good standard and bilateral comparative advantage of this product. We can see the value of exports from India to New Zealand to United States have been increasing up till 2017, and then fell somewhat. We can compare this to 5 global other economies here in terms of trade values. You can see they've been pretty static if you compare it that way. Most of it has been from actually India. It's the biggest source, followed by China, Pakistan, and Bahrain, right? So India is the biggest exporter of this particular product to the United States. Again, we can play around and look at the unit price and all the other descriptive statistics like we did before. The other interesting part over here is the preferential tariffs notified to the WTO by the United States for other economies. So this means that United States has trade agreements with other countries, with Canada, Jordan, Bahrain, Israel, Mexico, all of these countries that have some sort of trade deal with the United States. And you can see that this is the minimum ad valorem duty and the maximum ad valorem duty, right? So this means that as part of those trade agreements, they actually managed to get significant concessions. From remember that the MFN tariff is 20.9%, but all these trade agreements have this product at 0%. So basically means you can go ahead to walk to the U.S. negotiators and say, hey, you gave all these other trade agreements, trade partners at 0%. You know, we're not worse than them. You can go ahead and give us the same 0% tariff in our trade deal if you're going to negotiate one with them, right? So that's that. By the way, I should have mentioned before, if you have any questions, feel free to buzz or jump in. I don't want to keep talking this whole time. Any questions so far?
Any questions from the audience who are joined online? So I have a quick question, Alexei.
Sure.
The underlying data for this is, can you tell a little more about the data source? Is it Comtrade or BASI? Or?
Yeah. So it is Comtrade. Now, as I said, Comtrade doesn't have the trade values for many of the countries most up to date. So we use mirror statistics to try to fill in those missing values. So we don't adjust them like Baki does, you know, to try to find the real values there. But we do mirror it, and it's also a special type of mirroring, right? So besides filling in, we also try to harmonize all the data that we have to the 2012 HS version, which is H4. And the reason is because we want to show those time series that I showed before. So between different HS versions, there's usually about 80% conversion of one-to-one, and the rest of them go many-to-many, one-to-many, many-to-one relations, right? So kind of looks like this, right? So if this particular product from going from HO, this, yeah, boy. Right, so vegetables edible, not else qualified. So from H0 was one code, and then it got split into 4 particular code going on to H3 and stayed the same, right? So we, if we want to compare some of the H2 nomenclature with H4 data, it will be difficult because the HS codes will not be matched. So what we've done is we've created this all the data in H4, and for one-to-one, it wasn't issues. For one-to-many relations such as this, we split it into 4 sectors, but before that, we checked if available the mirror statistics for that particular year, if the country that we mirrored it from had actually data in H4 version, we want to see whether the code matches. So if the country had in a H4 version mirror statistics, we would get rid of the other HS codes that they were not bilaterally reporting, and assume that this was particular product to start with, right? So we try to narrow down rather than branch out an average among all the possibilities. So it was actually quite a complex undertaking to try to get the most accurate representation of the H4 statistics between them. The tariff data comes from WITS, World Bank, World Integration Trade Solutions. The NTN data came from Comtrade. Trade facilitation data came from our global UNTF survey data.
Great, thank you, Alexei.
Sure.
So, please go. Yeah.
All right. Any further questions?
Yeah, there's some question on the chat.
There's a chat, right?
Yeah. Yeah, basically, Neha is asking if TINA can be used for multilateral or plurilateral negotiations, or is it only bilateral?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do want to add the European Union and the Eurasian Economic Union as economic unions that have the common external markets. But if you look at the trade agreements that you usually have, besides those big ones, whether it's ASEAN or anything else for that matter, all the negotiations are in fact done on a bilateral model. And the tariff negotiation schedules are also on the bilateral nature. So I mean, it would be nice to have a quick estimate of what would be the effect of joining a particular agreement, such as what you would do with GTAP, and all the tariffs would go to zero. And that's nice. But at the end of the day, the negotiations are done at product level. In fact, usually even further than H6, you go to H8 or H10 between individual member countries. So, so we thought about it, but then we didn't really see the value of making this complex simulation model. That would not be useful, particularly because all the negotiations for those trade agreements are done at the bilateral level. So for example, if India were going to go negotiate with ASEAN, you have to go to each one of the ASEAN member states with the tariff liberalization schedule, and everybody has to be happy with that.
Got it. Thanks, Alexei. Another minor question, I think it's not necessarily for this application, but in general, when we compute RCA, sometimes we get pretty unrealistic numbers, mainly when you have small numbers, when you have initial trade as very low, either in the numerator or denominator, right? So
Yeah.
in this context, I think when you do the filters, obviously you are excluding them because you are setting up a threshold. But beyond that, do you also take that into account while computing the RCAs to ensure that there are not you don't end up in some spurious numbers or artifacts just because of some issues like small
Yeah.
flows?
Yeah, so that's we didn't see that particular problem with the standard revealed comparative advantage because it really goes the denominator is the global trade in that product. You may get an extremely small value, but nothing super crazy. The bilateral one does a little bit go crazy sometimes, which is why we actually have the option to exclude both of them. But typically, again, because this was a feature requested to us by trade negotiators, they do want to have that figure on hand to see whether it whether whether their product is comparative by the traditional trade indicators that are commonly used still. Even though there's many arguments of not using it, it's there because it's familiar.
Thank you, Alexi. I think there's one more question from Dr. Somesh Mathur.
Yeah.
And that is, I couldn't see that clearly, but I think it has to do with the tariff escalation.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll come back to that because I haven't actually talked anything about the tariff simulations yet, right?
Yeah.
So let me then go back and run this the partial equilibrium, but let me just give you the benefit of explaining really quick exactly what partial equilibrium is in case somebody doesn't know, right? So partial equilibrium, as opposed to general equilibrium, it means that the analysis is really conducted a product by product. So the advantages really is that it requires quite little data, and it provides very disaggregated results. And as opposed to GTAP, which is the Global Trade Analysis Project, that's sort of the most well-known general equilibrium model. It only has up to 65 sectors in version 10. I think version 11 has more countries but fewer sectors. But really, it's kind of a little bit more aggregated than some policymakers would like. And really, with partial equilibrium, it really is quite easy to explain the results, right? So if the tariffs are reduced, the exports to that country will increase, right? That's pretty much it, right? There's no other interaction there. The only question is by how much, and that really depends on the elasticities or how responsive is the import demand to changes in the prices. The disadvantage is that there is no interaction between sectors, and this may miss important nuances. So if for example you have two imports that are complements, and all of a sudden you have a large vehicle manufacturing sector. If you have a large decrease on the let's say on the tariffs of rubber tires, this will benefit car manufacturing sector, which may also import more glass or electronics or whatever. but there is no that interaction between different sectors. So that's a big disadvantage. And again, it relies entirely on elasticities, right? So I'll go back to the point of elasticities here, but in partial equilibrium, there's really two effects that happen, right? The first one is the trade diversion. So trade diversion is when relative price of import from country A falls because of the law of demand, the quantity demanded from A increases, right? But at the same time, the overall quantity consumed, the point on the same indifference curves, right? So so import from country A, import from country B, right? If we remove tariffs on imports from country A, the quantity demanded by a country of imports from country A will go from QA1 to QA2 because relatively from imports from country B, they will become cheaper, right? So that actually means that you will buy less from B, more from A, but in this effect, we assume that the overall quantity remains the same. So that's the trade diversion. The second effect is the trade creation. That basically, micro perspective, means moving up to a high indifference curve, right? So that means that because your basket of imports from all the sources now becomes relatively cheaper, you're able to afford more stuff, and the law of demand is that you will buy more of a particular product, right? So that's the trade creation. And again, it's important to note that this applies to product by product analysis, and there is no interaction. So for example, if there's a significant drop in the price of, for example, apples, you would expect to have an opposite effect because it's a competing product. Oranges, you would see people to buy fewer oranges. It's a fruit, but you wouldn't see this in a partial equilibrium. You may see this in general equilibrium, but not in partial equilibrium. All right. So there is a very famous partial equilibrium analysis model. It's called SMART. It's available on WITS, and over there, what you do is you stick in the two countries that you want to negotiate. You want to see what would happen if you remove all the tariffs. So essentially, it's driven by these two formulas: one for trade creation and one from trade diversion. And there's a when we were building this tool, we basically used the same formula, the same research, and we found that the problem with SMART was that it was unconstrained. So the reason I skipped the previous question was whether Tina does the opposite effect, whether we can use it to look at the increase of tariffs, and like, yes, we could. And the reason was when we were developing it, the United States decided to have a trade war with China. So everybody wanted to know what happens to those washing machines and dryers and steel and so forth. So the first thing I went to look at what would SMART tool say, and they didn't say anything because it didn't work with increasing the tariffs. And I think the reason it didn't work is because it was unconstrained. So that means if the if you have such a high increase in tariffs, you may have such a decrease that will be more than the actual initial trade, right? So if before you imported $100 worth of particular good, increase the tariffs due to whatever sanctions, whatnot, the imports will decrease by 200. It doesn't work, it doesn't make sense. So the first thing that we did in Tina was we adjusted the formula so it was constrained up to the maximum of the initial value if the tariffs do increase, right? The second part was that the formula was asymmetrical, right? So if you see here, part of the elasticities and the are here, but the initial prices are basically it's a ratio between old and new price. The problem with that is that it creates asymmetries. So if you increase the price by 5% or decrease by 5%, you should really see a similar result. But because the initial price versus new price switch places, you saw asymmetries. So we fixed that asymmetries as well. So so three things we've done: we constrained the formulas, adjusted for symmetries, and we used our own elasticities, which I'll talk to. We will talk about in a second. But at the end of the day, you will see if you adjust for those parameters, the simulations give you exactly the same results as if you were going to run a smart simulation tools in WITS, because the underlying formula is the same. In fact, I have a spreadsheet. If somebody's interested, you can play around and change the elasticities, remove the assumptions of symmetries, and unconstrained doesn't really matter that much for reduction in tariffs, and you'll see you get exactly the same results as you did with smart. Anyway, so okay, so like I said, the solutions was that we ensure that trade creation, trade diversion do not exceed values, and we use the midpoint denominator rather than the original price. So the manual for WITS, and this is true, there's you can look at the MITS values, really that the model is very sensitive to few very badly estimated behavioral elasticities, right? We did in fact usually use the same World Bank's elasticities that's available in WITS, but we decided to estimate our own to improve coverage, to use more recent trade values, shorter time series rather than going from 1990, and harmonize across HS versions. And we used latest estimation methods available, relying on our Beast, which is sitting next to us, next to me right now, 128 gigs of RAM. And if you go back to resources, the elasticities technical note is available here for those who are interested. But going quickly here, in the studies, even though we had a lower number of overall elasticities, I honestly believe that it's because they had a different weird mix of HS versions. We had higher number of, so this is the original studies, we had higher number of countries that we used. We had higher number of products, and you see that we used the estimation method from 2002, 2018, whereas the original paper was from 1998 to 2002. I'm not sure if that was the latest versions used, because they did say it was last updated in 2012, but there was no additional note on the manual on exactly what was the result. So the 2008 paper, that's the time series used. In 2012 it was updated, but there was no no technical note on what happens there. But even then, it's 2012. It's a little bit longer. So this is the HS section elasticity of imported demand, the magnitude. And we can see there's a little bit difference, significant difference, much higher in chapter 5, but lower in chapter 20, and nothing in chapter 21. So anyway, so that's a little rant of elasticities, but the whole point here is that after you have this list of the products that you want to negotiate, you would select all of them, and then you can click on simulate tariff liberalization. You can advance, you can change the assumptions of supply of elasticity and substitution of elasticity. And we do want to add later on Kia Nichita with elasticities, but not available at this stage. But let's leave them as it is. You can look at this is the tariff. If you have better information, you can change the current tariff to something higher or lower. And again, you can actually put a new tariff as higher rather than lower over here, right? So by default, we have 0. Now it's important to see that there's actually fewer economies here than available commodities. And if you recall, previously we had 1,600 something commodities, right? 1,380. And the reason is because we do need all the information, right? So for some cases, there will be the MFN tariff that's missing, or indeed there'll be no imports from India, right? If we look at the dairy end, there'll be some products for which India doesn't actually import anything. The United States doesn't import, for example, U.S. imports from India. So it's important to know this, a very important limitation, that if you exclude these products later on, and it doesn't apply just for this case, just in general, it's because you cannot shock 0 to 0. So that's a limitation that's also available in GTAP. From a low base here, you cannot see what happens if the United States removes this 10% tariff or 14% tariff or 28% tariff here, right? So this needs to be kept in mind to keep an eye out on these particular products with no existing trade. Anyway, let's simulate for all the available products. And this is where it's run at product level to examine the trade diversion and trade creation. You can see it's done rather fast. I invite you to do the same estimation in widths, and you'll be lucky if you get the results in a couple of hours. So here's the results, and we can see that trade creation for India would be $11.2 billion more exports because of removing from tariffs. So from 7% to 0%, from 7% to 0%. And we can, if we'll hover it, we'll see that in most of the cases it is trade creation rather than trade diversion. And important feature here is that it's also affected economies, right? So where does this trade diversion come from? So we can see in this particular product, jewelry, debatable, but anyway, 21 less million would be from France, 18 less will be from Italy, and 15 less will be from China. Petroleum, Canada, Netherlands, Russia, United States, these are all will be impacted by India's removal of tariff. Conversely, if the other ways we've been told that this was very useful for some negotiations, they wanted to know, these particular negotiators, what would happen if countries B and C, so not us, right? We're not having a negotiation. Whereas India, we're just looking around, but let's say Bangladesh would want to have a trade agreement with ASEAN or United States, what would happen to us? And they would see, because we are indeed trading in the same products, if they're going to have a free trade agreement with a particular economy, we will see that we will be impacted through the trade diversion effect shown here. Right, so voila. So you have now the impact of trade liberalization with the United States, which is $11.2 billion, not insignificant. Any questions so far? So increased by 18.67%.
Yeah, I think there has been one question from Dr. Somesh Mathur, but I don't think it's directly related to this, but maybe Dr. Mathur, you can unmute and explain your question. Or we can.
Oh, I see a chat here.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you so much for accommodating these questions. We faced this issue in SMART that when it came to tariff escalation, there were issues. So good to hear that SCAP has made some modification. But when it comes to TCTD, that Oleraga model probably is the one which is being used further by Yeats, and they've also worked on it. But because ESCAP also maintains a very exhaustive gravity data, I'm just thinking that this gravity model can also be used for working out TCTD with those dummies. But I was thinking that whether they have moved from macro data to firm level data, because the gravity specification will change accordingly. I, 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 I know that Alexei, you are covering this SMART and TINA, but when it comes to trade creation and trade diversion, uh, my question is related to that gravity model can also be used. Of course, GTAP doesn't give you TC and TD, and as you said, it's very aggregated, but something can be also deduced from there. So these are my questions, and I was about to write another question is about tariffs coming down across countries. So what about non-tariff barriers? What about trade and service liberalization? What about FDI liberalization? I think these are issues, questions students keep asking us. That, sir, tariffs are for India, say 15%. They're still higher, average is still higher. For South Asia, it is maybe it is around the same. For Pakistan, it's around same. But over time, the tariffs have come down. So what about tariff barriers? Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Just about the gravity model. So I can show you NISCAP trade analytics. So we have a different tool that we developed. Right. So we have this NISCAP trade analytics portal where we have the basic gravity model, but it's very high level. It's not product level. Which is why we've been working recently on extending it significantly and actually having, besides, because this is based on the OLS, and this is really supposed to be as a learning tool about basic gravity models. So we are working very hard on releasing the next sort of complementary graduate level tool, which is structural gravity model, which technically can be even used as a general equilibrium model under certain assumptions. And in that case, basically we will be using product level data to run whatever level of sophistication of gravity modeling, that then the coefficients from them can be used to plug in plugged in and to see what sort of effect or they have by liberalizing tariffs or at product level, but also with more sophisticated assumptions. So we will have that tool available shortly. We released it during sort of structural gravity workshops that we had before, and we've been improving it. And when it's ready, I'm very happy to give an additional talk on that. On NTMs, we created a new data set on the ad valorem equivalent of non-tariff measures. It's currently being peer reviewed, and as soon as that done, what we want to actually do is to add this beyond tariff simulations, add an option to simulate sort of a reduction in tariffs one way or the other. So that's actually on something that we're working on right now. We're just waiting for the data set to be accepted because it's at HS6 product level. On services, just last year, WTO released for the first time a bilateral data set that they estimated on trade flows. And again, we already played around with this data set. We combined it with DESTA, which is the design of trade agreement data set that has information of some service related trade provisions, right? So what we want to do is integrate that into TINA as well, where you can run a similar simulation. So unfortunately, we're stuck right now trying to find competent programmers, but as soon as that is ready, we'll be making additional changes to TINA, where we will basically we'll add these requested features, because we have been asked before on this, and so this will include NTMs and services, and we'll also actually include estimates on the impact of CO2 emissions, right? So that would come from two facts: one from shipping, transportation, maritime, but also estimates on the product embedded emissions bilateral level, right? Because some countries are more CO2 intensive in producing certain products than others. So we'll try to incorporate them to see how much trade diversion creation, what does that mean in terms of CO2 emissions? So those are the things that we were working on, and it's good to see that there's interest in that.
Right.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, thank you, Dr. Mathur, for the question. There's one from Dr. Balaji. Maybe you can unmute and ask the question, Dr. Balaji.
Yes. In the trial version, like we are choosing a list of negotiating commodities, and then we are trying to run a regression. If a tariff is becoming zero, then what happens to the benefit levels? And I was trying to choose, for instance, India and US for shrimp commodity, and what happens. I just wanted to have a simulation exercise, but that page was not responding. This question was that whether it is necessary to go for a negotiation list and then for some simulation, or still we can choose a specific product between one or two countries and still the simulation works. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good product. So you don't have to run the simulations. I'm not sure the issues that you run into. So if you go back to negotiation list, and if after passing that filter it's still there, so half of the time it doesn't work because, again, either there is no imports or there is no tariff, right? That's usually why it doesn't work. But if you click on the on even before you run the tariff simulation, if this key information here, the trade and tariff is there, and again, it doesn't have to be MFN tariffs. For some countries, there's already some sort of preferential tariff, which is non-zero. So if you click on that, on the product that you're interested in, and you scroll down, it should already give you the information. So in the background, it does run product level simulation. So liberalizing tariff on commodity to 710,102, increased trade by 47.13%. So it by selecting the product from the list, you should already see this by default. And again, to get on the negotiation list, it does have to pass through these sorry, through it does have to pass through the filters, but you can essentially, you know, it already should be really more than 0. You can switch off the RCA product, and you can reduce this to, I think 1000 is the lowest that you go to. Otherwise, you know, it's too small to get anything meaningful. And then whatever product that you do, you can actually search for it in the search box. So like,
Okay.
what product we have? 271012. It's there. So it's there. You click on it. Even though we didn't run the simulations, you can see here that liberalizing tariff already gives you that information.
Okay. Okay.
Right.
Thanks.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Alex.
Yeah. As a sort of happy side effect of this, we did see, well, you know, beside increasing tariffs for whatever reason, it's also sometimes the case that that countries lose preferences, right? So there's 2 scenarios where these preferences are lost. One is LDC graduation, so not the case for India, but for places like Vanuatu, Bangladesh, Nepal. These are important because once they lose the least developed country status, what that means is that they lose access to generalized systems of preference, GSP, plus preferences offered by the United States, by Japan, China, the EU. And so I'll show you this because it will be relevant to India as well. But I will change the reporting country to Bangladesh, and you see what I mean. So negotiate for a different economy. I'll select Bangladesh, and then instead of selecting economy, I'll say this from the menu here, simulate the preference loss. And so here we see the existing trade agreements that Bangladesh has, including with India. But here we see it's part of APTA, like India, Bangladesh, Laos, Switzerland, Turkey, Austria. Really quick, I will just filter them by if they have anything to do with the LDCs. So they have GSP for LDCs, including the European Union. So I'll select any, obviously you need to pay more careful attention and have more information about all these different trade agreements. Some of them may not make sense, but I'll just select all of them and submit and simulate. So this will take a little bit longer because what it does is that it looks at the existing tariffs that Bangladesh benefits from all those trade partners and removes it and says, what's the next lowest? Is it really the MFN offered by that country, or is there another non-LDC related preferential trade agreement that Bangladesh can benefit from, right? So after running all of this, you'll see that the trade loss from Bangladesh is about 20 billion, or 44% of its imports. You would take this with a little bit of grains of salt, right? Because this is such a massive reduction, massive increase in the tariffs from all around. You know, theoretically, it should be a suspect straight away because, you know, if they lose all these markets, what's going to happen to all these products? Well, these products will flood the domestic markets, and therefore they will depress the price, and the lower prices will actually make it more competitive in those axes they lost preference, and also in the other potential markets they can offset some of this billions, right? Because it's a partial equilibrium model. It doesn't look at this supply side of the equation, right? So that's their important limitation. But it does give us an indication which markets are important, and for Bangladesh in particular, it was very important to note which countries it should really negotiate trade agreements to make sure that they are not severely impacted by graduation as predicted, right? So we can hear the commodities that they most most impacted commodities here. It's t-shirts, cottons, and it's no surprise Bangladesh being a big global supplier of textile products. But if we jump a little bit lower, we will see that look at all the countries that are being lost as the market, which is Germany, France, Spain, United Kingdom. So these are the countries that originally gave the LDC preferences, and assuming those LDC those supply side shocks, which is a very strong assumption, is not necessarily the most realistic ones, but you can see that it really does need to ensure that there is some sort of agreement with the EU, with the UK. Otherwise, it will have significant price pressure on those products. And we can also see that these are the countries that benefit from Bangladesh's reduction in LDC status, because they now become more competitive through the trade diversion effect. They actually benefit from it. And here's India here, and that's the important part. You can look at your existing competitor that are about to graduate and can see, okay, what are the sort of markets that we have a potential. This goes beyond negotiating trade agreement. This is like, okay, we know that they're graduating. What's going to happen? Which markets they will miss out? Maybe we can try to take advantage of that, and we can see from there they will increase exports to Germany, France, Spain, Poland. I mean, this really reflects the countries here, but the main products are t-shirts, 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 and once again t-shirts. So unless Bangladesh signs a trade agreement with with Europe anytime soon, and the United Kingdom, there's potentially a great opportunity from Bangladesh's LDC graduation to Indian t-shirt manufacturers, for example. All right, any questions here?
No, let's continue.
Okay.
Anything from the audience? Please go ahead.
Sorry, I thought I was okay. I was waiting.
Can continue. Yeah, please.
Yeah. So another. So this is one of the preference laws is to due to LDC graduation. Let me give you another example here, and this is where we definitely use mirror data, and that's where's our Myanmar. So Myanmar and Cambodia really have been slapped by removal from the GSP plus preferences due to various political things, right? So EU in particular, they excluded, I'm not sure if it's all at this stage, they were threatening some of them, maybe they've excluded all of them, but they've removed Myanmar from some of the commodities, some of the preferences given to them. And again, this is not increasing tariffs, this is just removing them to next preferential agreement or MFN if they don't have it. And you can see that this has the potential to, without considering supply side effects, remove 13.24% of the imports from Myanmar, impacting, of course, all these EU and ex-EU member states, and potentially having some sort of ramification on India as well, particularly in shirts, cereals, fish, t-shirts, and garments. So this is from Myanmar side. So that's another way how you can use this particular tool. Okay, so let me go back to the case of India. So this is the latest tool, and this is still in the experimental stage. Unfortunately, it's been stuck as experimental for quite a while we're trying to improve it. So going back, we wanted to negotiate it, if I recall, from the United States, right? So we looked at the descriptive status. We looked at the commodities to negotiate tariffs on. We did some partial equilibrium analysis, but during trade negotiations, you're also usually very much interested to know in the existing trade agreements that your potential trade partner has. So what are the trade agreements that the United States has? So we will click on the negotiables. We will click on the trade agreements, and this will take a little bit of while. But what there's been some studies that shows that basically, you know, trade agreements, especially between countries that make a lot of them and are usually powerful, are essentially copy and paste. So what we've done is we actually run the similarity index for each country between all the trade agreements and that it has, and then this gives matrix. It's not that clear. Again, sorry, this is, let me highlight that this is a very much a beta version, and we're still working on it, and we're running into some technical and programmer issues. But this gives you, for example, the Panama, United States, and Panama and Safter DR that have 84% similarity. Peru and the United States, and Colombia and the United States that have a 99% similarity. So you see that if your United States did a trade agreement with an economy that's similar in terms of its composition or importance to global trade, they might have certain provisions and chance. So going lower, you can see that these sort of the provisions that exist in all the American trade agreements so far. You can see that all of them have something to do with agriculture. Most of them have stuff of anti-dumping, dispute settlements, and in general, they're really quite comprehensive. So looking, looking at what was this, Peru and Colombia and the United States, we can Peru and Colombia, United States. We can first of all, we can actually just look at the text of these trade agreements, right? We can select them here, Colombia, United States, Chapter 1, national treatment, market access, that's services, that, right, for goods. Textile and appearance, apparel, that has a specific chapter, US and Colombia. You know, that's not something that's generally a chapter, I believe, right? That's very specific on textiles. Might be something interesting for India if they have the same preference. But let's select these two agreements, and we can actually compare the text of the selected agreements. So this is US Peru and US Colombia, and you can see that these text agreements are essentially the same. Anything that's not been that's been changed is actually just the name of the country. So in fact, if you look at the provisions of trade agreements, 75% of words of global trade provisions are copy and paste. So the good news is you'll know what to expect. The bad news, it's embarrassing if you forget to change the name of your trade partner. In fact, that's what happened when they initially published the trade agreement text. I forgot, this was either Peru or Colombia. I forgot which one is first. But everybody's, well, it's very interesting, but this is not the name of our country, and it's been published. It's a true story. So you can look at the more than one agreement at this stage. However, the tool does not perform very well when you have a lot of agreements and provisions. So it doesn't perform that particularly well on multiple agreements, and that's something we will want to optimize at this stage. But at this stage, you can have the text agreement. You can search the texts on it. You can see for stuff on SPS. on definitions on general applications, you can see SPS somewhere inside there being mentioned, right? Initial provisions. Obviously, you would have SPS in the SPS chapter, right? So you can already do that. One other tool that we work on and that I'm super excited on it, which actually is based on this, is that we have a text analysis tool that we're able to look through text agreements of essentially all the text, right, online. So you want to know which trade agreements, for example, have provisions or keywords on, well, basically just complex search through all the trade agreements that we can find, right? And we're working on this, and it's also in beta version. And once we're ready, we're happy to give results and do a seminar on that tool as well. Right. So that's pretty much. Sorry, I think I see a question here. Let me see.
Yeah, there is a question from Dr. Javaria Mariam. So maybe you can ask the question. You can unmute yourself.
Hi everyone. I wanted to know, like for trading services chapter, sometimes it happens FTA is on positive list text is there, while nowadays mostly the negative list approach is taken for trading services. So via TINA, can be done, like we can still compare two different formats of FTAs?
We really this is more of a plagiarism tool. You know, we want to see whether the text has been copied from one to another, so or how common it is, right? So we don't necessarily look at the content and the meaning behind it, right? We just can at this stage look at whether the text is similar or not, right? So yeah, it gets complicated very soon, very quickly. And I mean, one of the things that we ran into the problem is sometimes the spelling is American versus British, and even though the meaning is exactly the same, they show us lower level of similarity, right? So so that's the problem. But at least at this stage, if you are interested in these text agreements, you can access the tool. You can you can quickly look at the text agreements for the chapters they have and search for keywords and try to make sense of it by making your own judgments on that. So Tina is not quite that smart yet to give you a full answer to the positive versus negative list. Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alexi. That was really amazing to see how much you know how much can be done using this. I remember when the Trans-Pacific Partnership was being negotiated, a lot of people were, a lot of researchers like us, we were looking at the trade agreements signed by the US with other countries, painstakingly going through all the text and assuming that similar offers may be made by US to other countries, and likewise going through all the other free trade agreements by other partner countries in TPP and doing the same. And a lot of lawyers are involved in these things because these are very, very deep, details in the text. So it's really nice to see that this thing is there, and at least you can, one can know what to expect in these negotiations. What will be offered by the partner that can be done. So this is really, really helpful. So I think I had a very minor question, but it may even be a redundant question because I might have not listened to you properly. But you had talked about this paper by Key, Nisita, and Oliraga. And I think that there are two things, or at least two different studies I know they have done together. One is on the, or the same study they had both. So one is on the estimating the ad valorem equivalence of NTMs or trade.
Yeah.
And the second one was on the elasticities, right? The trade elasticities. And or maybe in order to estimate AVEs, trade elasticities were also estimated. So that it's probably a combination. So when you mentioned that you have updated that. You have done both, right? Elasticities and have you also done AVEs or?
Yeah, so this one, this is Key Ortega, and it's
Nisita Noliraga.
yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
So that one is on all elasticities alone. In fact, you can there's the whole data set here if you want, and this is the technical note. Sorry, data as well as our code to make any adjustments that you want. So
Right. So it's basically the elasticities, the import demand elasticities, right?
yeah, that's the one, import demand elasticity. So that's what we tried to replace with that. The other paper on NTMs, we again, if you remember, you were also involved in the GTAP stuff, right? When we've done this for Asia Pacific Trade and Investment Report for 2019, right?
19, yeah, 19 we did it together, yeah.
So we removed the GTAP version and decided just to look at an entirely econometric paper to see how we can do the price-based method.
Great. No, yeah, I think, and I also you also had that was one thing, and you also had this trade facilitation, extent of implementation of trade facilitation, right? So we used that in another study, another.
Yeah, and that one we, I mean, that was 2017, and yeah, haven't done anything since then.
Okay.
We still have, yeah.
Yeah, so those also would be, I think, when Somesh Mathur was asking about the NTMs and others. I think those also, if they are inbuilt here, that will also be of great value, I think, in the future. And also the when it comes to services trade, looking at the STRI may be helpful, right? Looking at the services trade restrictiveness index. So we have been doing some internal studies, and we are relying on that actually to see how much the STRI would be reduced as part of some trade negotiations. Because for India, services trade is very important. That is where we need more access when we talk to partners. So that's another.
So one thing that you might find useful, and this is what we basically do in Gravity at the services level, because there's a new data set, like I said, from WTO on trading services. So there's this data set. It's called the Design of Trade. Design of Trade Agreement, and so it actually does have the data set on services, right? So it has specific data set. So the reason I don't particularly like STRI in our case is it has a very limited country base, right? And particularly for least developed countries and smaller countries, you know, that's usually the countries that we want to try to help out. Whereas in Asia Pacific, STRI has only what, 9 countries or 12 countries. But this one has any, so the two sources are, you can look at the positive, negative services schedule submitted as WTO accession. So that's one that should give a baseline for that. And the second one, you would look at see what sort of liberalization they have done already as part of other trade agreements, right? So if they have chapter on services, whether there's substantial provisions, whether GATS is mentioned, whether it's already positive or negative list approach. And then a good thing is it actually does go into particular sectors, right? So see, so there's professional business, communications, constructions, distributions, education, energy, environment, financial, health. So it goes by the high-level SID chapters, from my understanding. So this should be very useful for your research. At least gives you an idea which agreements to look at.
Yeah, this is very helpful, Alexei. I think this is something we can readily use for some of the research we are doing now.
Yeah.
Great. And another question I have is, I know that you have done a lot of hard work to, to reconcile the data, and you're giving me some examples before. If somebody wants to look at a more recent year, let's say somebody has access to, like internally, let's say within the government, we have access to latest data, what is happening in 2022 January or something. Is there any way to feed the trade data there? I know tariff you mentioned, you can do that. But is there any way to, or if it's not possible now, in the future, are you planning to provide the users the flexibility to upload an alternative trade data? And also, it could be, the reason why I'm asking is, it could be because we want recent data, or it could also be because we probably have a different view of the data. So let's say I believe in Baki or Basi data,
Right.
or I believe in our own country's statistics, like DG. We have a Director General of Commercial Intelligence Services. So that's like, basically my question is about the possibility to use alternative data sets as an input to the
Yeah.
tool now or in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, great question. So what we wanted to do, that basically, particularly for the partial equilibrium, there's two things. Number one, we wanted to give access to download editable results. So basically, if you have it will be an Excel formula at product level, you have different assumptions, you would just put in your own trade data. So that's one thing. The other thing I wanted to do is to run a workshop on partial equilibrium analysis without the use of TINA, because even here you could see that people straight away wanted to see, well, what if we products we want to look at straight away without having to go through the process. So what I wanted to do is to run a partial equilibrium workshop later on, just using R, and this model, how it can be implemented. So those are the two alternative approaches that I have. With regards to uploading your own data, honestly, it's already, we were really hard about it, but then we thought it's easier if somebody just downloads the editable Excel, then they can play around with the data rather than having to try to match the HS codes with all the other stuff. It seems a little bit hard to implement at this stage, but I'll take a note that it could be also interesting result, something interesting for trade negotiators with better access to data.
Yeah, thank you once again, Alexei. So, does anyone have any other questions in the audience, online or here? So then I think we really had a very wonderful session, and yeah, I think I'm getting the same kind of feedback there from Dr. Somesh Mathur. He's thanking for the wonderful session. So we are going to also upload this to our YouTube handle, so that people across the country and across the world can benefit from the discussion here. So first of all, again, thank you a lot, both Alexi and Rupa, for making this happen. And this is only the first, as we already mentioned. We are going to have many more sessions like this, and in the future we would like to have more detailed discussions on the partial equilibrium model, gravity, and so on. So thank you very much again, Alexi and Rupa and your entire team.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you once again. Looking forward to more sessions again. Thank you, and thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you for your attention and great questions, and it's a pleasure. And I look forward next iteration of this. Hopefully,
Sure.
within the next couple of months, we'll be able to finally release the text analysis and structural gravity online model.
Wonderful. Looking forward.